Next, I would like to invite Professor Samson Jay. Samson, can I pass over to you? Hello, good morning, Samson.
Morning. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Caroline, and also the student speakers as well. I think your last remark, Rachel, about the recorded lecture is very interesting. Some students even share with me they love it because you can fast forward the lecture. And I find it fascinating. I love that. It's great. Well, I only want to talk about 3 points this morning. And hopefully it's something we can talk more when we have the Q&A time. And hopefully that will extend our discussion on those areas. It's interesting to see the opening, the PowerPoint talks about students as, talks about studies as, and also the support as academic advisor we may be able to provide to our students. So those are the S. So now I also want to talk about 3 different A's, and again, hopefully they make sense. The kind of context, the backdrop I come from to this sharing is I reflect on my experience working, supporting, chatting with students as Associate Dean at the Faculty of Social Sciences. In that particular space, I do come across quite a lot of students with challenging situation. In those cases, I need to go far beyond academic advising. I do need to put on my counseling help, sort of psychological assistance, heads, and so forth. At the same time, I'm also a regular academic advisor. I think at the moment, in total, I may have approaching 20 students under my belt from various years. And then the third backdrop I bring to this discussion was, I think, back to March and April this year. I worked with the university to provide some online free counseling for both HKU and also outside HKU students as well. So in those places, I heard stories as well. Okay, 3 A's. The first one I want to share is the self-doubt. Not too sure about my own study. Am I doing the right course? Am I doing the right major? Am I even in the right institution? I find students when they are less mixing with peers, coming to the campus, talking to teachers or people, whoever on campus, compounds by the isolation. One scenario, mother doesn't want me to go out, and I attach to my mom very strongly. I listen to her almost religiously, so I don't go out at all. I suddenly become very isolated, lonely, and I talk about being very self-doubt, meaning of life. Why do I do a bachelor degree? Why do I go to university? What are the purposes, all those things. So I come across scenarios like this. I think as academic advisor, we don't go down to the kind of full-fledged counseling or psychological support, but I think it's important to hear, to listen to things our academic advisees are not too sure, a lot of question marks in their mind if we open that space, if we extend the invitation. The second is I want to talk about, which was mentioned by the former speakers already, is stress. You don't need me to remind you what stress is. Our students, teachers, and also administrative staff, colleagues are facing. So I want to talk about 1 or 2 specific aspects when I think about stress. Number 1, some students' stress can deteriorate to become real mental health concerns or even diagnosed conditions. So I would encourage our colleagues, teachers, as academic advisors, we need to be sensitive, sensitive enough to pick up things that may go quite wrong. Scenario one, online isolation, a student literally becomes suicidal. And one particular sad story, I should say, even a mild suicidal attempt was made as well. So stress, isolation is not a good combination. The other thing is stress about planning the program ahead. Caroline mentioned already being a first-year student, but doesn't feel like first year in HKU at all. Students are very stressed about meeting the faculty graduation requirement, planning their going overseas experience, or third-year student, kind of embarrassing stage. Should I grab an opportunity to get it done or wait for next year, as Rachel mentioned, but knowing the competition to go to desirable places, institutions is so strong, so might as well I just grab it. So a lot of stresses surrounding that. Okay, the last is, the third one is, you guess what? Strength, 優勢. Strength, resources, things I do well. I came across a student talking to her, not happy at all, quite tearful. Things don't go well. But once we changed the topics, asking, but hang on, well, you're year two, you've been doing pretty well being at HKU, you must be good. So tell me, last time, how did you cope when things go wrong? Is a good question, I think, to invite students to examine the strength space, not only stress, not only self-doubt. Strength, another scenario, I simply encourage students to talk about the good time when you are mixing with your friends, catching up with your friends, unlike now not coming to campus. And I can tell in that conversation, the girl's eyes just light up, tears gone, and just a smile on her face, recalling the good, pleasant experience. So I would encourage the academic advisor, including myself, inviting students to go to the strength space, self-examine some of the resources, resilience, things they have done well in the past. Well, I pretty much want to finish here. My last single thing is, as an academic advisor, I did the regular thing, sending out the invitation, inviting students to come to see me. I'm flexible and da-di-da. Well, no one replied. And then I send again this time. The interesting thing is, if I make a small single extra second effort, students did reply. I have 2 or 3 replied, apologizing. I'm sorry, Professor, I didn't reply your first email and da-da-da. So I will say it's an extraordinary time we all are facing. But if you and I, academic advisor, go one or a small mile kind of extra steps, students respond quite well. Of course, it's your personal choice. In 1 or 2 cases, I even offer my personal mobile using WhatsApp to stay in touch, but I know it's completely your personal decision, and that goes down well with 1 or 2 students. I do not do it often or regularly, but 1 or 2 students we feel quite close, and I can trust. I offer the WhatsApp option as well. Hey, Rachel, thank you so much for the invite. I enjoyed the sharing and listening to our colleagues and students' perspectives as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Samson. Okay, so yeah, indeed, a lot of good advices. I really appreciated the effort that you've been putting into reaching out to students. Not the first time, but second time and multiple times. So shall we maybe hear from the student advisors? So now, if you stand in the shoes of a student, do you think what we've been doing, like what Samson's doing, Caroline's doing, is helpful to students? Do you have any other suggestion for our advisors? What about Kari? Would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Caroline and Samson. So I think in general, what what Caroline and Samson said are quite effective to me, I think. And but there is one more thing that I would like to say is I think we need to how should I say that? We are sure that the student, we are sure the confidence of the student. So what I mean is that so when students come to advisors, they seek for help. They want the situation to be better. So we need to, I think we sometimes for the weaker students or like the less confident students, we need to really appreciate this very first step that they have made. They come to seek help. So for example, when students come to say, oh, I'm so afraid to talk with my lecturer. I don't understand the lecture at all, but I'm so afraid. I don't want to talk to my lecturer face to face or in whatever ways. You need to, I think we may need to say like, so, but instead of finding the lecturer, you come to find the advisor. That means you still want the situation to go on. So we want the situation to improve. You don't want to, like you still want to understand what the lecturers are actually talking about. So we may need to talk about what is the best way that the students can do. So for example, maybe the students are really too afraid of raising a question in front of the whole class. Maybe he or she can send an email to the lecturer directly saying that, oh, I have some issues about this. Or like if he or she is still afraid that asking the lecturer, saying to the lecturer that, oh, I don't understand the lecture is still quite a shame to them, or like it's still too embarrassing to them, maybe we can encourage him or her to express the question in another way. For example, maybe they can start with like, oh, I have a point on the lecture note which I'm not really understand, or like I want to confirm whether what I understand is what is like what I have understand from the lecture notes are what the lecturer would like to say. Are we sharing the same ideas based on your recording and your lecture notes? So asking in more, I would say in a more specific way, like asking specific questions may sound better for the students who are not really confident about asking lecture questions, because you are not telling the lecturers that you don't understand, but you just want to like verify or like to confirm if your understanding are correct. So in this way, you won't be, I would say you won't be showing that you are not a high achiever. So, yeah, so after all, the main point, the main issue that I would like to talk about is we need to give confidence to our advisees, or we need to appreciate the efforts they have already made and encourage them to move on, to do more, achieve what they actually ultimately want to achieve. Yeah.
Very good, Carrie. Thank you. Thomas?
Can I just add something on that really quick before?
Oh yeah, sure.
I really appreciate those points, and I think you're really right. And if I was a bit flip about it before, I think that's a big part of what we can offer, and it's something that as I do through the academic advising, I do think it's important to give specific steps for how to approach. I do it with undergrads, but our first year students, but also even like third and fourth year students who are looking for internships. Like specifically, how do you write an email to approach a professor you've never talked to before, and what goes into that? Because those are skills that you have to learn them. You don't just are born knowing how to do those things. So I think that's a really good point. So I think providing really specific tips for how to talk to people, I think is a really great idea. It's something that can be emphasized in classrooms too, and especially with first year students, I try to spend a lot of time in my first year course giving people tips on how to ask questions in class, which is along the same lines, like, and even to the point of telling them about studies that have shown that, you know, we all think that we're going to look more dumb if we ask questions, but actually studies show that people think you're smarter if you ask questions. But hopefully, you know, again, like showing that and trying to give specific tips for how you can become more confident to express your opinions in different scenarios.
Yeah, totally agree with that, Caroline. Very good. Okay, Thomas, do you have any further suggestion for us?
Yeah, sure.
Hi.
So I very appreciate Caroline and Samson's suggestion on very specific advice, because that's also what I want to stress on. So for myself, so I remember when I was in my first year, I asked, I went to find my academic advisor, and I actually wanted very specific advice on how to plan my course from the very start, and also how to plan my research career. So because I want to work on research, so I asked them for very specific questions, and if I don't come out with very specific questions, and I hope that they will guide me through how to ask those questions. And so I didn't actually look for some general advice, because those, if I need general advice, I could just go to the faculty website, and those are very official advice that is not really that useful for my own case. So what I get out from the supervisors are their personal stories that I find very inspiring. It's not it's it's not that their stories is inspiring, it's that the way they tell me, and their willingness of telling me their own experience, that is very valuable. And I became friends with those professors, and they keep telling me a lot more about their research career, their personal stories, like how they fell down and how they get back up, and what they have experienced, the hardships, and how they make important decisions. So just like when I want to do research, and I want to go to overseas research internship or even exchange, then I will ask them whether is it is it worthwhile of doing so, because we need to spend a lot of money to go overseas. So I always ask them for such advice. And when academic advisors or just normal professors as an advisor, if they tell a story, their personal experience, that will make students feel safe to tell the advisors their own problem that they're facing. So I'll be willing to tell them more, rather than asking questions in an advising talk, something like that. So it's always better to work on one-on-one advising.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Yeah, I like that idea. Yeah, it's like sharing and feeling very close to your advisee will encourage them to, well, really tell you what's worrying them and what's going on in their mind. Okay, thank you very much, Thomas.